Hello.
Hello.
So, here we are at the inaugural episode of Rassilon, Omega, and that other guy.
That other
Uh,
guy.
that other guy. We'll get to him. Or her. Or them. But yes, this is a podcast I have been dreaming about off and on for years, and have finally decided to see if I can make it happen. Um, so it's going to be, we're going to kind of have two tracks on this podcast. We'll jump back and forth between one reviewing some of the better, more interesting episodes of Doctor Who in, I guess, chronological order from the Doctor's point of view, um, and one that will review stories that focus and reveal elements and aspects of Gallifrey and Time Lord culture, and the deep lore of the Doctor's homeworld, and the Gallifreyan culture, the planet Gallifrey, uh, all the time lore you could want. So and so I'm Brian, and this is Sohel.
Howdy, howdy.
So, and unfortunately, the other could not make it here today because we couldn't convince him to leave his possibility engine. So he's off having fun on that, crossing the Alps or some such. So it's just the two of us. Um, so uh, I guess I was Sohail, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to say a thank you for helping me out and showing me how to do all these things, and helping me with all the logistics of all of this, and just being here to be enthusiastic about all things Time Lord.
I'm really excited that you invited me to go on this journey with you, and part of the inaugural or charter team here. Who knows who might come along for the ride in the future? And so, yeah, cheers to that, and I'll toast my drink that I'm having here with that. So, I guess we're supposed to throw it on the TARDIS, right? Like to launch a
Oh,
to launch a ship,
we will
basically.
we
Do,
will throw a conceptual bottle of Rassilon's red against the conceptual exochronoplasmic shell of our ship, of our time ship.
there's a question for you, TARDIS person here. How do you christen the TARDIS? Do Time Lords observe a christening ceremony of any sort?
Um, I mean, it's certainly something that's very close to that. Is I and this is more about becoming captain of the ship, so to speak. So it's more of a captaining ceremony than a christening of the ship ceremony. There might actually be a christening of the ship ceremony, but I don't think they've ever revealed it in any story that I know of. But a Time Lord has their symbiotic nuclei that reside in their bodies are connected, um, and symbiotically bond to their TARDIS that they are granted, and through what's called a Rassilon imprimatur. So there is actually a bit of a ritual, and very minor, relatively minor ritual, at least the one time we've seen it performed, of the Time Lord and their TARDIS becoming linked together, married almost, if you will. And so there's definitely that. I don't know if that is exactly what you were asking about, but that's about the closest analogy I can think of that we do know about. There
I
could
think
also be a.
that's a good alien kind of christening. I think that counts as a christening ceremony. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's more often reference to some sort of marriage, going all the way up to Neil Gaiman's The Doctor's Wife episode, the title of which is based on the
Right.
same thing. So, um,
But I guess an actual proper TARDIS would have a crew of what, like 10? Is it
I
10
might
Time Lords or is it just 10
a
Gallifreyans?
well, every TARDIS will have one designated senior Time Lord that it's linked with.
Mm-hmm.
At least every active TARDIS. There might be some inactive ones in the repair shop or something that have had their bonds severed because their Time Lord has gone off and got a newer model. Um,
It
so,
happens.
yes. um, but a fully crewed TARDIS is supposed to have 6 people. So my understanding is that's where the apprentice Time Lords come in, who are and the junior Time Lords is that they will serve as the other 5 crew members, so that all 6 stations in the console can be manned simultaneously during critical operations. So yeah, my and given how little Time Lords sleep, it's probably most authorized research and observation expeditions sent out from Gallifrey probably have 6 people on that TARDIS. One senior Time Lord and generally 5 apprentice Time Lords, but there might be another senior Time Lord who's serving in one of those positions just because sending 2 TARDISes are overkill, but the expertise of both senior Time Lords might be needed for some particularly exotic situation. And of course, the apprentice Time Lords are all hoping to score enough points of metaphorical points that they eventually get granted senior Time Lord status and are given their own TARDIS. And obviously they, in to use naval parlance, the senior Time Lord acts as the captain of the ship, so and of the expedition.
I wonder, now you've got me thinking. I've got so many more thoughts now about a possible Doctor Who spin-off with a properly piloted or properly crewed TARDIS and regular Time Lord missions, not these renegade missions we've been watching. Uh, you
Well,
know,
regular Time Lord research and observation missions tend to be just that. In fact, it's very rare for the Time Lords to actually step outside their TARDIS while in the field. They will generally conduct all their research from the safety of the inside of the TARDIS, using the scanner to collect data and stuff, and then do whatever processing and analysis and whatnot that they're going to do. Now the
but with
celestial.
those, but with that bespoke circuitry, you could possibly make a room that lets you like a holodeck on the TARDIS that lets you kind of like go out there and kind of explore the environment, but through the safety of the TARDIS, perhaps.
I've not heard of that, but it's possible. There is a way to take the atrium circuits that generate so that they generate a space between the external main doors and the doors to the control room, and you can actually reprocess that. So there have been like a case of a TARDIS turning into a store, and the inside of the store might actually be still the outside of the TARDIS, or at least some sort of intermediary atrium zone with
Like a
then,
vestibule, sort
yeah,
of, maybe
yeah.
even, yeah.
Whereas, and like the back door to the bath to the woman's room might actually be what leads into the TARDIS properly, the control room. So, that
Well, I'd
there's
make it like the supply closet or something,
some, yeah.
where well, unless you had a companion, that's how you snatch your companions. Maybe it's a little creepy though, but if they actually go through that back door in the women's bathroom that says out of order, they've asked for it.
Generally speaking, Time Lords don't usually let aliens on board their capsules. So you
Yeah.
wouldn't generally find a
Well,
situation where they were collecting companions.
I don't want to derail you further, but
Yep.
that's an interesting topic to keep exploring, I think.
Oh yeah. No. We will do some deep dives into TARDIS stuff as we go through these. But Let's see. Back on the agenda, I guess some tidbits of Who news that I thought was interesting. Silva Screens is going to release the soundtrack for the last season of Jodie Whittaker, the Flux season, and the specials that came afterwards.
It just
Both.
dropped today too,
Oh,
if
did
I'm
it?
not
Okay.
mistaken. Yeah, if I'm not
All right.
mistaken, it dropped today.
So,
Well, today when we're recording this, when
yes.
audiences see this, maybe it's already been dropped a little
Yeah,
while.
a bit a few days later. I don't remember the guy's name, but the composer for the Jodie Whittaker era is fantastic. I absolutely love his unusual, strange, and very memorable and interesting music. And I think he's a wonderful breath of fresh air after Murray Gold, who was fun in his own way, but I think might have overstayed his welcome. So I really like the. There, I have some quibbles about the Jodie Whittaker era, but none of them relate to the soundtrack. That was amazing. The soundtracks are amazing.
That's funny. It's one of the things that I critique the most about the Chibnall era is the music. I was such a fan of that Murray Gold drama. Like just having that I loved how he would accentuate an emotion with something like that. So I feel I felt the opposite, though. I have no critique for the musician from a musical standpoint. I think the composer is actually very capable and makes beautiful music. I just didn't think it fit for what my expectations were for a Doctor Who soundtrack.
Well, if you're expecting it, then it's not very good Doctor Who.
I do agree, though. One thing that I appreciated and noted is that there was a return to more synth type music, which I liked because I love the BBC workshop. What is it called?
Radiophonic Workshop.
Radiophonic Workshop, and the work that they all did for the classic series.
Yeah. You have taken the time to listen to the soundtrack while not watching the show. Just play it straight on YouTube and okay for the new stuff, because I was kind of uncertain about it the first few episodes I watched, but when I played the soundtrack by itself, I really started to fall in love with it.
Yeah, it's a different vibe, but that's the thing is that I mean, I feel to me it feels more like background music, like the wallpaper kind of critiques that people give to Star Trek.
Yes.
TNG music, so it felt more like that, and it's again coming off of Murray Gold. He's so different, it's just so different. So it's it was.
Murray Gold climbs out of the TV set and says, "You are going to be excited."
But I mean,
it's
also
sad. It's so sad.
But that being said, I do think also the other thing I think is I have a lot of attachment to the motifs, or leitmotifs as they're properly called. I think that Murray Gold came up with for the different characters, including Time Lords, including Gallifrey itself. There was this there were these leitmotifs that kept reoccurring, and each Doctor had a different theme, which I really appreciated. So I didn't recognize any of that, and so I guess my cues, my normal what I'd been well trained in, and that's not anyone's fault. It's just me. Those things didn't, they didn't register the same with the new composer.
Well, I will give this. Murray Gold wrote "Here Comes the Doctor," and that is the best piece of Doctor music to come out since Delilah Derbyshire, or however you say her name, wrote the original created the original theme back in 1963. "Here Comes the Doctor" is amazing. So that is definitely, and Murray Gold did that. Murray Gold found a way to eclipse all the other composers of Doctor Who and write a Doctor Who piece that wasn't just a reworking of the opening title. So.
Are you thinking of "I Am the Doctor"?
I am the doctor. Yeah, okay. I guess it's "I Am the Doctor." Sorry,
That's what he's gonna compose for the
here
60s.
Yeah.
Here comes
Sorry,
the Doctor.
I am the Doctor. I am the Doctor. You're right. I'm not. This is why I need you here.
Well, the only reason I say this is because I love "I Am the Doctor." I agree with when you were saying that. I was like, and when you said "Here Comes the Doctor," I'm like, that's an obscure one. I don't remember. Is that the 12th Doctor?
No,
is that
no.
I was like, I don't remember. So it's like
Yeah,
surely
no.
he's talking about I am the Doctor. Yes, I am the Doctor is arguably yes. I agree, hundred
All
percent.
right, we made it 15 minutes before we made a we started putting bad information out there.
We
That's
caught
how long
ourselves
it
there.
took before the whole thing went straight to hell. Let's see. Other news: Doctor, they have finished the first 4-issue Fugitive Doctor comic book. Um, which I have not had a chance to read, but I'm very eagerly wanting to get my hands on that. I just have been too busy. But these are 4 issues of comics talking about the Ruth Doctor, Doctor Ruth, the fugitive Doctor, that appeared in the season in Jodie Whittaker's second and third season, and her adventures. And Big Finish is also preparing audio dramas with the original actress coming to do the voice and play the fugitive Doctor. So we're going to get to know a lot more about her, and maybe they'll explore some of the other Morbius Doctors.
That's great.
Um,
I love Ruth. She's really exciting as this fugitive Doctor character, and she's one of the highlights of the Chibnall era. I do like Ruth a lot. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's kind of like once you see her, you're like, oh, this is an obvious version of the Doctor. Why have we had to wait so long before we got a Doctor like this? She totally owns it with just one episode basically.
Yeah.
Also, they announced today or yesterday that the next collection of Christopher Eccleston audio dramas from Big Finish, loosely titled, this box set is titled Hidden Depths, and it will include a story about the Sea Devils and a story that brings back Liv Chenka, who was originally showed up as a one-shot Seventh Doctor companion before becoming a regular, long-running eighth Doctor companion, all in Big Finish. So she's a Big Finish veteran who's done a whole her not the Liv Chenka's a character's name. She's a companion who's basically from the Earth's future and has gotten involved in a whole lot of stories with the Doctor. And so it's kind of cool that she's going to get to meet Christopher Eccleston. At least I think so. So.
It's so cool that Christopher Eccleston has found his way back to Doctor Who, even if it's not on the screen version. One of the cool things about the Doctor Who in general and the Doctor Who fandom I've noticed is that the audio dramas are so well accepted and embraced, and so if you're like a whatever you want to call it, a Doctor Who canonista, it's wonderful that like you can include these audio dramas in the in the canon, so to speak.
Yes, it is. I mean, Doctor Who doesn't have a well-defined canon. I mean, there's
I
so
actually appreciate that. There's a lot of struggles in the other universes out there with the arguments about what's canon and what's not. But yeah, Doctor Who kind of destroyed canon and made everything really tie wonderfully. There's wonderful mechanics, I should say, behind the scenes that allow for bigger, broader perspectives of what canon is.
yeah. Also, the writers just don't care, but
Yeah, I like that too.
there's that too. So nobody ever bothered to say the novels don't count or the comics don't count. You can kind of, Steve Moffat has said it all happened. Some of
Right.
it might have happened in an alternate timeline, but it all happened. So, and he said that while serving as showrunner of the show. So if you can't, if that isn't the last, the current word on the thing, because Chibnall hasn't made any statements that I know about, then I don't know what is. I can't think of anything that would supersede that. So, yes, Eccleston is my second favorite Doctor, so I'm very excited about every one of these box sets that he's done. So, but let's talk about today's story. You have the Big Finish audio Auld Mortality. Yes, there's a better picture of the cover. And this was created by Big Finish and released on May 9th of 2003 AD in the Humanian era. of the Web of Time. It was written by Mark Platt, an old hand who wrote Doctor Who stories back in the late '80s for the Seventh Doctor, and was directed by Nicholas Briggs, who is also known for doing the voice of the
Of the
Daleks.
Daleks. Yeah.
Yes, yes, among many other monster voices. And Nicholas,
Director Nicholas Briggs.
yes, and Nicholas Briggs is basically one of one of the head guys at Big Finish, and has done incredibly incredible diversity of voices and characters for Big Finish, and a ridiculous number of monsters. So Auld Mortality is a part of Big Finish's Unbound series, which means it's kind of akin to the Marvel What If series, where they just say, "Hey, let's ignore continuity, such as it is in Doctor Who, and tell a new story. Just say a big what if." And create a new thing. And they did a series of those, trying to get fairly well known actors to come in and, what if this guy played the Doctor, or what if that guy played the Doctor.
Right.
Yeah, the story for this is loosely riffs heavily on Mark Platt's novel Lunbarrow, which was originally a going to be a TV story called Lunbarrow, but then they,
which is the house that the Doctor belongs to. No, he's a
yes,
Prydonian or whatever. No.
Prydonian is kind of like a bit like your Hogwarts status, but it's also like a political party, whether you're Democrat or Republican or Independent or Green Party. It's Prydonian is kind of like the chapters: Prydonian, Arcalian, Petrexes, Dromian, Carillion, all of that is kind of like those kind of parties. So
I see.
Whereas your house is like the name of your family. And in this case, Lunbarrow was the Doctor's family. And this story takes place in an alternate timeline, as all the Unbounds do, from the more primary timeline of Doctor Who. Mark Platt pulls a whole lot of stuff, including the characters of Ordinal General Quences and the character of Badger, are pulled straight out of the Lunbarrow novel and plopped in here in a slightly different context. But you can easily see how they both, how things could have diverged earlier on. So, the publisher's summary for this story is: what if the Doctor and Susan never left Gallifrey? Whatever happened to the Doctor? He could be Gallifrey's favorite author, or a bad-tempered recluse, or crossing the Alps with Hannibal, or all three. But an adventurer in time and space? Hardly. The family would never approve of that. They had other plans for the Doctor and the awesome power of the Time Lords. So, more succinctly, this is Doctor Who Does a Holodeck episode, for those of you who are familiar with Star Trek. It's not the traditional holodeck breaks down and causes problems episode, but it's definitely one where where gallivanting around on the holodeck is a significant part of the story. So,
I see in the log here you mentioned Gormenghast as well, and I love Gormenghast. I read that at
so you can tell me what that means, because I've not experienced Gormenghast, but
Oh.
a lot of people have. A lot of people say that both Lunbarrow and Auld Mortality heavily riff on the styles and tone of Gormenghast.
I didn't catch it when I was listening, but now I feel, because I've only read Gormenghast, I've been meaning to watch the series. There's an adaptation that the BBC or Granada or someone made of it recently, not too long ago, and I heard it's pretty good. I saw like maybe a little bit of it, but the books are fantastic. The books are comprised of, now it's been like 20 years probably since I've read them, but the books are comprised of, the stories are called Gormenghast, Titus, I forget what his last name is. I guess Earl Titus. There's a middle book, and then there's Titus Alone, which is like the last book or something like that. And so, anyways, the saga is very interesting, and I could see echoes of it in the way the way the story is told about like the what if quality to it, because Gorman Guest has a lot of like magic realism, I would say. I would,
Mm.
if I'm remembering it correctly. But anyways, like the Earl of Gormenghast is Titus, and he has like purple eyes, and he finds this wild woman in the trees, and like adopts her, and almost ruins his like his earlness or whatever, and like yeah, like I think he goes off with her eventually, and then he like and he goes off on this other life, and he experiences a whole other life that's not an earl's life, but then comes back to Gormenghast, kind of like Tarzan, a little wild, I think, after that. So yeah, it's an interesting story. I might be mixing it all up there, Brian. But
All right. No, I've heard for years that it riffs on some of the tone or ideas, but I never knew quite what it meant to be Gorman Gasty, like in the way that I know what
it's a
something.
highly regarded story.
Yeah.
It's one that a lot of people really enjoy, and I was introduced to it by a very erudite friend of mine in my 20s. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, cool. I'm glad that you could appreciate that, because I was like, I don't even know if I feel qualified to talk about this point, but at least you are.
I wasn't qualified, but I did it anyways.
Well, that's the kind of attitude the doctor did. The doctor would applaud that. Uh, anyway, the coordinates for this story are: it is set in largely in the cisterns beneath the capital on the homeworld of Gallifrey. It's the dating is not terribly clear, but it's at least 300 years after the Doctor was supposed to have left Gallifrey in the prime timeline. So he's got to be at least 700, maybe much older than that, but just at least 700. And it's probably which would make it probably sometime shortly after in the 21st century, or maybe later, during in the in from the point of view of Earth. So yeah, that's the where and the when.
Right.
Um, and being that it's an alternate universe story, the big question is, what's the John Bar hinge? What split it? Where did where did Donna Noble turn right instead of left? Right. What was the exact moment? Because the story picks up and things have been deviating off for hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, uh, since the Doctor failed to leave Gallifrey. My theory is, in the original timeline, um, Quences tells the Doctor's cousin Glospin, in the novel Lunbarrow, we learn this, that Quences tells Glospin that he's going to make the Doctor head of the family after he dies. And then Glospin kills Quences, and to prevent that, because he doesn't feel that the Doctor is worthy of the honor of being head of the family. Um, but my hunch is that this is they have a group of people called the Matricians on Gallifrey, who use the Matrix to predict events that might happen, what would otherwise be unexpected events. And very often the Matrix is able to predict murders, and thus avert them. And it's possible that the Matricians, who Quences was on a pretty good relationship with, in some other timeline, picked up a prediction of his murder, warned him, and so instead he managed to avoid being killed by Glospin, and came up with this new plan to take control of the Doctor and the Doctor's destiny, rather than the plan that we learn about in the novel Lunbarrow. And in this new plan, he actually prevents the Doctor from leaving, rather than getting killed a little early by one of his fellow cousins. So that's my theory as to how it splits. And that's pure headcanon, on my part. I
Sounds
did.
pretty reasonable to me.
It's It's because I'm always, whenever I see alternate universe stories, I always want to figure out where was the moment that, Donna Noble didn't turn left.
I like the way that you, yeah, we should continue to use that
Yeah.
phrasing too. It's good. I'm
Well,
gonna start
I think
using that.
science, that's why I called it a John Barr hinge. That's apparently the general science fiction term for such a thing. The moment at which the timeline split. And a lot of some alternate timeline stories will quite happily tell you, oh, look, this is the moment. But a lot of
Right.
other stories, especially something like these what ifs, which, take place centuries after the timeline split, really just leave it up to you to kind of guess and figure it out. I mean, yes, the Doctor didn't leave Gallifrey, but why? What started the chain of events that led to him not leaving Gallifrey in this timeline? So. Um, Being that this is an audio drama, I don't have a lot of pictures to dig up that I can show you, but I did find some really nice fan art. Um, this one here, I believe, is done by apparently done by Morgan Holden. And This is basically these are all alternate CD covers. But this
This
shows
seems to
off.
be a tradition in the Who fandom as well, because pretty much everyone I know like prints out like custom covers and replaces the ones they have from the official stuff. Like I've seen this growing up happening for the VHSs. I've seen it happening for the DVDs, the Blu-rays, and also the audio dramas. It's like it's a weird thing. I don't know. Do you see that in your circles as well?
I've certainly encountered the art. It's not something I ever bothered doing,
I
but I
wouldn't
can
do it either, but
but
yeah.
I think they're kind of wanting everything to look more uniform on the shelves. I have a bookshelf of like 700 Doctor Who books, but it's also got all the DVDs and Blu-rays and audio
Nice.
dramas all slotted in there. So there's no, and the missing adventures are stuck in, and it's all stuck in as chronologically in chronological order from the Doctor's point of view. So you might have stories that weren't written till the 90s, but are stuck back there in the middle of a couple of Hartnell TV shows.
It is cool to see Susan in the Time Lord. You know
Oh yes,
the form. Would that be like their dress uniform or
yeah,
their
that is
formal
their
robes?
formal dress.
Formal dress, yeah.
The collars generally are only worn for very formal occasions. It does appear that anytime you're going to meet, most of the time when you're going to meet with the president or do anything with the presidency, that automatically counts as you need to have your formal
Your
collar on.
formal collar
But
on. Badgie, Badger looks freaking scary in this one. I don't know if I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's they did a pretty good job of photoshopping a badger together, given that there's not a lot that's not a picture that was officially released by the BBC. Whereas finding a picture of Jeffrey Baladon or Carol Ann Ford and adding it, and even that Time Lord outfit appears to be something that's somewhat photoshopped. I've never seen an outfit that looks quite like that.
Mm.
So they did a good job with that one. And I think we had some more. This one here is just, I think, has this supposedly, I'm guessing that's supposed to be Quences and obviously Susan and the Doctor there in the center. Um,
Jeffrey Belden looks great as the Doctor in this particular one. I just like the way he looks here.
Yeah, here he's wearing they photoshopped him into the black and white robes that we see the CIA wearing and the young
Right.
master when he stares into the untempered schism. My Since the color of your robes tell you which house you're part of, my headcanon is that the black robes and white robes, or black and white robes, represent a Time Lord who is trying not to be affiliated with any particular chapter. Politically neutral, you could say.
I see.
And I think that's why presidents tend to wear white, is because they're trying to show that they represent all the chapters and not just the chapter that they were part of when they were elected or nominated. Um, so that's my headcanon as to what's up with that outfit.
Cool.
And and the Doctor has certainly been rejected and outcast from his family, he might also consider himself disinterested in being connected with the Prydonian chapter at this point in this story. He's very much a recluse. And then I think there was a third one. Well, let's see. This one I think was done by El Nielchi. It was all I could find. And then we have this third one here.
This one's my favorite, I think.
I think it's more artistic. But I feel like there's something I love about seeing Carol Ann Ford in the Time Lord robes that this one doesn't seem to quite do.
Yeah.
But this one is quite nice as well. And again, they're trying to emulate the standard the standard Big Finish CD packaging of the day, rather than the specialty packaging form that they came up with for their Unbound line. And this I found on DeviantArt by someone named Mega Plumefinity. So
good job, Mega Plumefinity, if you're listening.
Yes. So yeah, they're just trying to get a little more graphic design and graphic on this particular audio story, because there's not a lot out here. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. They made
cool.
Yeah. They made 2 sequels to this. There's another Unbound audio, which brings back Jeffrey. How did you say his name?
Oh, I said Baildon.
Baildon? Okay.
Baildon. Baildon.
Jeffrey, I'm terrible at pronunciation, and so everybody just going to have to put up with that. Feel free to
What were you saying? I didn't hear you say it different.
I think I said Baladon, but there's no Ladon, so yeah. I like
Baladon.
There's no la. There's no a between the L and the D.
If I were a betting man, because I don't know what his name it would be, but Baildon would be my guess.
Baildon, yeah.
Baildon. So if I were a betting man, I'd guess that would.
Well, the ending of this story is a bit ambiguous. But they did eventually do a sequel, which brought back Susan and the Doctor in this particular version of the Doctor, and we do find out which version of the ending is in fact the one that happened. So, and then apparently there's a short story that showed up in an anthology called The Innocent. Well, the audio sequel was called A Storm of Angels, and then there was a short story called The Innocents that also dealt with this particular timeline, but I've not actually read that one, so I need to. Lots of material out there. So yeah, what did you think of Jeffrey's Doctor? And
I really dug him, and I dug the reading and the performance. It was a delight to hear. You said, I think earlier, this was like the best Susan story, right? For you?
I would say this is one of the best performances Carol Ann Ford got to do as Susan, and part of it's just she was given better material here.
I agree, and also, but they vibed really well together. I just thought, the two really, it was great. It was really cool, and Susan's like a mysterious character who, in the modern era, I should say, I guess, she's more mysterious, and or there's different aspects to her. Like, people wonder, was that the angel lady, is that Susan, or is Susan ever gonna come back? And there's like this all this like there's all this mythos surrounding Susan, but to hear this audio drama and start off and kick off with this story was a real delight, because I focus so much on the shows and just recency bias, and also just the fact that it's what's running right now, and it's the easiest thing to get is the modern Who stuff. So it was great to go back to this what if story of the first Doctor, and kind of before the first Doctor, really, in a sense. And so it was very cool. I did like the little bits. I really loved Susan, the whole idea of the grandchildren. So the Doctor would be, I guess, what, a great grandfather,
great grandfather,
great grandfather. Yeah, so that's interesting.
Say, yeah.
It was just overall, it was just I think that was a delight. It was fun. I didn't know what to expect going into it, so I was very excited. Anything new? Because I haven't been exposed to a lot of Who, but definitely the my blind spot would be in the audio dramas and also the expanded universe, if you will. And so this was great.
All right. So, but like Jeffrey's doctor, he was. They were originally considering hiring Jeffrey
Belden.
Baildon, Jeffrey Baildon.
I gotta now look it up and see if
Yeah,
it's really
if
that.
we can't handle a name like this, we are doomed going forward. The names get so much more non-Western than Baildon. Oh, we're so screwed. We're gonna need TARDIS telepathic translation circuits to make this
I'm,
podcast coherent.
that's so funny. You guys will automatically hear it the correct way in your language when you're watching this podcast because we're using
Yeah.
the translation circuits.
Yes. Anyway, he was considered strongly considered for the role of the first Doctor and for the role of the second Doctor when it came time to replace William Hartnell. I think he might have even auditioned for the second Doctor, but I'm not sure. So he almost became a Doctor. Obviously, the actor was, by 2003 was quite a few, quite up there in years. But, imagining a younger version of this, do you think you could have seen him as a doctor, as a on-screen doctor, weekly adventures?
Yeah, I actually did a little research and looked him up when he was like around, in the different years, like when he would have been the Doctor, and I think he would have made a great Doctor. Actually, like he had a good look to him, and hearing his performance here, certainly he has. I think he nailed the Doctor the way you imagine the Doctor. Like I especially of that era, I would say.
Yeah.
So he I think he kind of nailed that for me, and he gave it his own thing. He has a really good voice too. He's a very good voice. So I liked his. I think he could have been a interesting second Doctor. I can't imagine, but only as a what if, because I can't imagine anyone else being the Doctor other than our doctors. But that being said, as we've grown in the storytelling and in the shows, we have revisited the older Doctors and recast them, and so he could have definitely have been a Doctor even later on, and he did outside of the audio dramas that he did. I could totally have seen him doing it on screen as well.
Yeah. I mean, he's between the script and his creative choices, he's definitely leaning into the Hartnell style. So he probably, obviously, if he'd come along as the first Doctor, there would have been no Hartnell for him to base it on. So he probably would have done a little bit more of his own thing, whereas this version is very Hartnell-ish. But yeah, I thought he seemed fine. If you want a Hartnell-y type Doctor, if there was a weak side to him, it's just that we already had a Hartnell Doctor, but and so
Yeah, it would have been nice if they let him. I don't know if that was a direction they gave him, that Nicholas Briggs gave him or what, or if he chose that on his own. But it would have been nice to have let him just be unbound, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean,
like
in the context of the story, it's probably not his first incarnation. This is probably some later incarnation of the Doctor. It sounds like he's been on Gallifrey long enough that he would have regenerated from, the William Hartnell incarnation into something else.
well, how
And then,
long does a Time Lord live without even regenerating? If they never regenerate, they could possibly live pretty long too. No.
yeah, I mean, it's possible, but yeah, the impression I get is that it's like at least 400 years since the Doctor stole the TARDIS and left Gallifrey, which would have been. I mean, Hartnell went out and got him. The Hartnell Doctor went out and had all sorts of adventures and got blasted by a time destructor and stuff like that. So he regenerated a lot younger than he would have if he just stayed and lived a safe, low energy life on Gallifrey. So how many would he have gotten enough years out of this? I suppose if he tried, he probably could have gotten.
I always got the impression that regeneration was like a thing that the Doctor uses way more than it is designed to be used.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only times we've really seen the Doctor regenerate due to old age is the Hartnell Doctor, who also had to go through some shit. If you look at the stories leading up to his regeneration story,
And the
uh,
11th.
and the 11th Doctor, who
Right.
spent 900 years fighting on Trenzalore. So there you go. How much can you get out of one incarnation? Potentially 900 years. So, and that's while fighting Daleks. So,
and that doctor is actually older than that. Wasn't he finally counted to be close to the oldest doctor, if not the oldest
well,
doctor
he spent
in Cro-?
900 years as the Doctor, so he ends up having the longest that we know of, the longest run as the Doctor.
Oh,
Like
okay.
Hartnell was only the Doctor. The Hartnell incarnation only lasted like 450 years, um, and so forth. All the others are like the David Tennant incarnation lasted like 7 or something. It's kind of sad how short it is. If you plot it out on a chart, David Tennant got like it was a little. It's totally fair for him to say I don't want to go. So it's not fair because he got so little. He
That's
went through
funny.
2 different David Tennant incarnations, and if you add both of them up, they're still like he's still, even if you add them together, the shortest running Doctor on history. If you add the years up, uh, so
I just heard the name pronounced. By the way, it is Jeffrey Belden.
Baildon, Baildon.
Baildon,
Okay,
yeah. So I can
all
confirm that.
right. I'm glad I have you here. So, 'cause I wouldn't
I'm
even know how to
team.
research that. So I was like, what would I? Where would I even go to figure out that? I
I went to a BBC interview, or like a Australian BBC interview with him, and just quickly scrubbed to where the announcer was about to announce him, and listened to it. And when I heard Belden, that was all I needed to know, and
oh,
I turned it off. Yeah.
all right.
The
Well,
multitasking generation.
I give you the title coordinator of the Matrix.
In outside of the Gallifreyan podcasting world, it's called the producer, and I'm happy to be a producer on your show.
Well, I'm very grateful to have you here. You mentioned the grandkids. The we see in the old comic books, TV action comic books, or Countdown to TV Action, or whatever it was called, that came out in the 60s and 70s, had William Hartnell traveling with 2 grandchildren, neither of which was named Susan, but John and Gillian is what their names were. And there have been some fans who've said, "Well, what if that takes place in this timeline, and this doctor ends up traveling with those they would have been his great grandchildren, not just his grandchildren, but maybe we can kind of squint just right, and all the continuity would fit together, because those comics are one of the hardest things to fit into the rest of Doctor Who continuity." And the art is often questionable enough that you don't even have to assume that's William Hartnell. I mean, it's clearly gestures at William Hartnell, but yeah. So that's an interesting idea. I do love the idea of Susan becoming president of Gallifrey, which was
Yep.
actually kind of set up in the script editor, Doctor Who script editor Eric Saward wrote a short story the Radio Times Doctor Who special for the 20th anniversary that revealed that Susan was a descendant of Rassilon, and technically, according to old, obsolete, but never rescinded laws, could actually put in a claim to be Lady President, and it would actually supersede any claims made by a president who wasn't descendant of Rassilon. So she actually would be fairly easy to get in as president, relatively speaking. according to that short story by the Doctor Who script editor. So this kind of, well, it never explicitly points to that story. It implicitly points to it by the idea that, yeah, look, she's managed to, she's cashing in on that. So, um, and yeah, I think it's what I love Susan. I know most people don't love Susan. Most people don't care about her. And honestly, if you just look at what's on TV and even a lot of the novels, I get it. But for some reason, there's a magic about the Doctor's granddaughter that makes her so much more special than the writing that she was often given.
Right.
So, and I feel this story was one of the ones that really, used Susan into her full potential.
Th- This is really wild. I'm just like doing a little side glancing here, and John and Gillian also traveled with the Eighth Doctor. It looks like.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I sadly, as listeners who are really deep into time lore, as I like to call it, are going to find the comics, Doctor Who comics tend to be the thing that I am weakest in. I have not read very many of them, and if there's a place that if there's a big hole in my knowledge of Doctor Who, it's almost always you're going to find it's from related to the comic books.
Comics.
That's where I die on a real deep tricky Doctor Who trivia contest.
Well, no luck for your audience with me either, because I don't think I've picked up one Doctor Who comic except for that crossover with Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I think that's the only time I ever saw a Doctor Who comic.
Which is a very interesting case because of the way continuity works in Doctor Who land. It's a canon Doctor Who story. The Doctor absolutely met Picard. That happened in the Doctor Who universe. But in the Star Trek universe, comic books are not canon. So that Picard never met the Doctor, but the Doctor absolutely met Picard.
We met Picard. That's funny.
So the Doctor met a non-canonical Picard.
That's so funny. Or time travel overrules Star Trek. So through whatever means, Picard merely forgot he met the Doctor.
Yeah, I mean, it gets even more tangled if you realize that in the Marvel Doctor Who comics, the Doctor met a few other Marvel characters who would go on to show up in other Marvel comics. And, of course, there was both a comic and a novel that had the Picard's crew meeting the X-Men. Who are Marvel characters who interacted with some of those Doctor Who characters. So, yeah, like I've been invited to a Marvel Halloween party, and I'm going to go as the Doctor.
It would be real. It would be legit. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to cosplay as the Doctor at the next Star Trek convention, see what folks think.
Well... let's see. So let's talk about Quences. Quences is a bit a new character that for most people he's only shown up in 3 stories, I think: Divided Loyalties, Lunbarrow, and Auld Mortality. His full name, if take a deep breath here, Quences Setian Obey Locator Grath Day D Yilu Lunbarrow Mass. Yeah, that's his full name.
Quences Setiano Bay Locator Griffith. I can't do it. You did a better job than I can't even do it. I can't finish it. It's too much. Q. Can we just call him Q?
That could get confusing.
That's true.
And he says he's the Doctor's great. He says he's the Doctor's great granduncle. But we don't know if that's literally a biological descendant. If that term means the same thing as it would mean on Earth, or if it's a Time Lord term, because after the Time Lords invented the looms and started growing all their new generations in tanks, they repurposed all of the genealogical words like cousin, father, grandfather, all of that stuff got repurposed to mean different things. So great granduncle could actually mean something a little bit different than what we think, what it sounds like it means. Just like Glospin, who I mentioned earlier, is a cousin of the House of Lunbarrow. The Doctor would say he's a cousin, but he's not literally a cousin. He was just grown in the same tank as the Doctor. We know that Quences is obsessed with funeral rites. And he was very frustrated that throughout his entire life of 7, maybe 8, we know he died in Lunbarrow after 7,000 years. Here he lived past that point, and only died relatively recently. So he made it past 7,000 years. But throughout that span, the House of Lunbarrow will produce only servants and petty clerks. And when the Doctor was being grown in or birthed, depending on what your take is on thing, Quences took the Doctor's genetic template to the matricians. I mentioned the matricians are the people who use the Matrix to see the future, and he took the biodata sample to them and said, "Hey, is this cousin we're looming going to be worth a damn?" And the matrician said he would be the most influential Time Lord since Rassilon.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a fairly, I think we've seen that fulfilled. I think we can
Yeah.
definitely say that the Doctor was the most influential Time Lord since Rassilon. So Quences decided, well, first of all, we know he's got to become a Time Lord. So he ended up cashing in a lot of favors and pulling a lot of strings to get him into the Time Academy, and ensuring that his various misdemeanors were overlooked so that he could actually graduate and achieve the rank of Time Lord. And Quences wanted him to become a cardinal so that he could redeem his family's name, but the Doctor didn't even want to become a Time Lord. He just wanted to get a doctorate in thermodynamics. That was all he really wanted to do was get his doctorate. And when it became clear that he was probably going to end up being a Time Lord, but not do anything else, and had no interest in becoming a cardinal, the housekeeper of the House of Lunbarrow thought he was such a disappointment that that she forced Quences to disinherit and banish the Doctor. This is in the original timeline, and it looks like that did happen in this timeline as well, because the Doctor talks about, I'm exiled from my house, and none of them will have anything to do with me except Susan and Quences, and Quences turns out to be dead. So, what did you think of Quences? And he was seeing the Doctor's one of the closest things we have to a father figure for the Doctor.
I thought he was interesting. He was a good foe or foil. He was good. He was very interesting for him in this episode. But I feel like I think I missed a lot of the I missed a lot of the little connections there, so I'm glad you pointed them out. I don't know why I didn't catch that.
Well, some of what I gave you was information from Lunbarrow or Divided Loyalties.
Gotcha. Okay, I was like, I listened pretty carefully. I was like, okay, yeah. Good, okay.
That's why I went over all of that, is because this is probably the best look we're going to get at Quences potentially in this.
But no, he was good. He was good. I like the voicing too. The way they did the effect. On his voice, it was very good.
Were you surprised when Quences turned out to be a ghost, or did you see that?
Yes. Okay. No, I didn't see it coming.
Yes. He carefully avoids ever being, Susan never sees him until up until near the end. So yeah, there's several little sleights of hands and tricks where the Doctor can see, where you realize he can't physically touch anything. He's just this brain scan that's rattling around in Badger's head. And let's see. Oh, did you? I had a picture of Quences. Get to stick
Ah,
that up.
yes.
Oh, right. I guess we had some pictures of the Doctor and Susan as well. I forgot about that.
Yeah, let me get that up there for you.
So,
All right.
what do we got? Well, there is. How did you say it again?
Jeffrey Balin. I
Balin.
Baildon. Baildon. Now I
Baildon.
said it wrong. Baildon.
Baildon. There's Jeffrey Baildon's Doctor, right there, and there's a picture of Carol Ann Ford that was a little older, which I thought would probably characterize what she would look like at this point,
Right.
farther in the future. Um, and there's a picture, just about the only picture we have of Quences, which is from the some artwork that was released for the novel Lunbarrow.
He has a striking resemblance to the Doctor as well, but I guess that makes sense if they're loomed and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's there. We see Time Lord's faces getting replicated a few times, and we'll go into that at some point. And there is Badger from the cover of the novel Lunbarrow. You can just see the Doctor peeking out with his question mark umbrella, but that is a Badger running a gondola there. And did you envision anything close to that when you were listening to it?
No. No, I did not.
So yes, he's kind of this.
Now, badgers with the horns, that's not a real life thing. That's what this badger, badgers don't have horns, do they?
No, he's really more
right?
of like some sort of pig bear thing
Pig
with
bear
sheep
thing,
horns.
Yeah. That's
And the vest he is wearing in this picture, and he would have been wearing in the audio, is one of the Doctor's vests. Badger had this weird compulsion to steal the Doctor's vests and wear them, often ripping them because Badger's kind of, ripped. So, but yes, that is Badger. Badger was a present / teaching aid for the Doctor that Quences acquired. Badger is an avatroid from the planet, from the world of Ava, and Quences acquired him, and he was a special, basically tutor and babysitter for the Doctor when the Doctor was very young. Because Quences was like, this is my one chance to have somebody who's super important. The Doctor is it.
So Badger's the Doctor's Teddy Ruxpin?
Yes, the Badger is the Doctor's Teddy Ruxpin. That is actually a really, really good way to put it. Yes. And I can't help but feel like he's loosely inspired by Spock's Salat. Just the idea
I get that.
That this famous alien had this really weird pet thing that was kind of fierce and dangerous looking with big teeth. I mean, obviously Spock couldn't talk to his Salat, but he could, but the Salat wouldn't talk back. Badger is fully conversational, and in fact a bit sarcastic. But Mark Platt has said in an interview that he created Badger to essentially be the Doctor's very first companion, a kind of a teacher nanny person who would go along and tell him not to do things so that he could go out and do crazy stuff.
That's funny. I felt bad for Badger. I did feel the feels at the end. So yeah, I think that was effective. I like Badger. I didn't expect Badger to look so much like nightmare fuel as these images, but I think I had a different image in my head. I no longer have that image. It's replaced by the nightmare fuel that is the official imagery. So I couldn't tell you what Badger. I guess we'll just say Teddy Ruxpin since I mentioned Teddy Ruxpin earlier. More like a Teddy, less like a I don't know what.
Yeah, the eye popping out constantly was a problem in the novel Lunbarrow as well. That was something else the Doctor was,
that's
pushing
funny.
his electronic eye back in. Also, they made a big deal about how the fact that his mouth doesn't move when he talks and the sound all comes out of a speaker in his chest in the novel, which was always a little weirdly disconcerting. But yeah, the Doctor liked him like, his little Teddy Ruxpin person. This was the only person who liked him, but actually treated him with some sort of level of respect, or just about the only person in his family. So
I really like the the little note about the Avatroid constructed in the Ava system, because that's a very Doctor Who thing that's unique to Doctor Who. I think it's like also Douglas Adams kind of does it, just like dropping mention of like a manufacturer. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's like it's like not necessary, but it's awesome when you do
I have a
it.
hunch that it relates somehow to the Raston warrior robots being made on, the being made by the Rastons from the
That's
Five
right.
Doctors. That was kind of, oh,
That's
Gallifreyans
right.
get their robots from other planets,
Planets,
kind of
yeah,
a
that makes
thing.
sense. And it
You
would
know,
make sense that there's like a whole planet's doing production of certain things, sometimes.
yeah, yeah. The original
Appalachia,
implication
what was it?
of
Appalachia, for example, with the sick. There's just
yeah.
like cool little thing. Yeah, it's like
The original novel Lunbarrow indicates that Quences just built Badger, but doesn't say it entirely explicit. But then the novel Divided Loyalties, written by Gary Russell, came along and explicitly said, no, he's an Avatroid from the world of Ava. And so that kind of cleared things up a bit, or at least provided a more definite thing. Well, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the wibbly wobbly. What did you have? What was the good about this story for you, Sohail?
new story. Always good for me. Like something I hadn't heard before, something new to put into my Doctor Who bank. So that was definitely a good. The production I thought was very good. When I'm listening to audio dramas, it's a different experience, and if the production with the sound effects and the music isn't like compelling, I'll tend to like waver. I'm like I'd rather have read it. You know what I mean? Like
Ah,
so. I guess that although there are times where I enjoy just listening to one narrator, or maybe reading doing a reading or something like that, but it didn't disappoint in that regard. And I guess the other thing is just discovering Jeffrey Build and getting the actor who plays Susan back. That was really delightful so those were the goods about it.
right. I I liked the opening of the Doctor showing up in the Alps with
Yeah.
Hannibal.
Oh
Felt
yeah.
very much like a
So good.
classic Hartnell story. That's exactly how the stories back in the '60s would work. Is he shows up at this historical setting in the middle of a blizzard and immediately gets kidnapped by somebody who might even be a good guy in the story and
Right.
hauled away. And
And
it
it
was
pays
very
off with the ending with the elephants and like I love that too, by the way. It was very chaotic, and that part of the like when the elephants came and all that stuff, it was cool.
yeah. I love the talking elephant. He was great. I didn't mention Saurus earlier, but yeah, Saurus was fun.
Yeah.
I think my favorite scene was the "let's open the casket" bit at towards the end, where we're all thinking that it's got to be the TARDIS, and the Doctor's found a way out. I thought that scene was brilliant, exciting, thought provoking, emotionally moving. It was everything that had a lesson and a morality to it, and a ideology that kind of pulled together everything in the episode. Um, and then it has this wonderful twist. No, it's just an empty box. It was just a literary conceit to get the traveler to different locations, which is exactly what the TARDIS was originally meant to be. So,
Right.
um, and I love the ambiguity of the ending. Which ending do you think was real? Did Susan? Did they say? Did Susan stay behind, or did Susan go with the Doctor?
Um, I think the real ending would be Susan going with the Doctor.
I mean, obviously that's what happened in the prime timeline, but
Yeah,
yes, in
exactly.
this timeline, the Auld Mortality timeline, how did it end?
Yeah.
All right.
Is that
Well,
what you think too?
I know the answer because I've listened to the sequel. But
Oh,
we
okay,
will
that's
take
right.
a
That's
look at the.
right.
We will
Yes,
take a
that's
look.
right.
Yes, we will take a look at the sequel at some point and see what that's about.
Oh, I love this journey. The way you've arranged it, it's very exciting that one day we'll come back to this. It's cool.
Yes. Okay, the bad. What did you find that you didn't like so much about this?
Um, you know, I think it's just in general the kind of like that the audio dramas are a separate thing, and so it's not something I invest myself in, and I think like too much, So I would say that that would be the thing, and then also that it wasn't like well, I don't know if this is like something that I don't know how the way I listened to it, it was like some of the segments were only like 30 seconds. So it was weird because it didn't just go to the next track. I had to like manually,
Oh,
like, so that was a bad experience for me. But I imagine when you're listening to it on CD or whatever, it
right.
was a more fluid experience. But
Yeah, I just yeah. Well, I listened to it on CD, but I also have the digital version that I threw in a playlist and stuff, and seemed to play
yeah, but
fine.
in general, just like it's always tough to have these audio dramas because you kind of wish they were bigger stories or like on TV, and I think that's like my only critique
Yeah.
of it or bad thing about it. Otherwise, it was pretty delightful. I think overall.
Yeah, I racked my brain, but I really like this story, and my bad is almost a good. It's good enough that it's painful that this is not part of the prime timeline.
Similar, yeah, like it's similar. I think that's how I feel. Yeah, exactly. Like it could have been a cool story, like a cool TV story maybe or
Well,
something.
I'm even fine as an audio story, but
But
it's not a
to not make it a
canon.
what if, yeah,
Yeah, it's not a
exactly,
what
right,
if, and
right.
yet that's part of the intrinsic nature of it. But it's still a little frustrating to me that it's not part of the primary timeline because it's
Right,
so
I guess
good.
it ultimately there's no stakes at the end because it's some other. There are stakes, but they're within its own thing.
Yeah.
Not they don't affect the rest of the. Although maybe these maybe in the future they could start merging them. I don't know. Something could happen.
Oh well, they did a
Oh.
few different unbounds. One of them had David. What if David Warner was the Doctor?
Oh, I know those actually.
Yeah,
Actually, that's a good one. I forgot about that. Yes, I know the David Warner ones.
and David Warner ones. They made a whole bunch of those. Those took off, and David Warner was clearly willing to show up as long as he, you know, and even hook up with the one of the biggest actors in Big Finish, Lisa Bowerman, who is now also one of the biggest directors in Big Finish,
Oh, that's great.
and so they became a couple. And then they did a whole bunch. Lisa Bowerman is most famous for playing the Doctor Who companion of Benny from the novels, and they did a whole. She ends up falling into an alternate timeline, meets the David Warner Doctor. They have a whole bunch of adventures in the alternate universe, and then
As
eventually they
Benny.
as Benny. Yeah, Benny
Oh,
from the
great.
Prime universe gets trapped in the alternate universe with an
That's great.
alternate Doctor after she's traveled a bunch with the Seventh Doctor and in the Prime universe. And then after a bunch of adventures, they manage to figure out how to get out of that universe. They go back to the Prime universe, and when we last left off, as far as I know, I haven't quite caught up with the latest of the David Warner audios. The David Warner Doctor, alternate timeline Doctor, is running around in the Prime Doctor Who universe with the Prime Benny, having
Oh, that's
adventures.
great.
And if you ever thought that, man, David Warner would make an awesome Doctor, and if you haven't, what's wrong with you? Um, the audios absolutely deliver everything you'd ever want for a David Warner Doctor. If you love Capaldi, this is an absolute must listen to.
Oh, that's
If
great.
you like your
That's really great.
older, grumpy, gruff doctors who are bitingly sarcastic and stuff, and it's just amazing. David Warner never phones it in, not once.
Oh, I love it. I can't.
And yeah, so I'm gonna
That's
work some of
great.
those in at some point. But yes, they do that doctor did make it into the prime timeline, and unfortunately, David Warner has passed on. So I don't know
Yeah.
what's happening in his. They're I think they just released a box set. I don't know if that's the last box set that they recorded before he passed on, or if they have some more waiting in the wings. But yeah, there's a very limit to what they're going to be able to do with that series because of that. Um, so, and wibbly wobbly bits of this episode. We did the good, we did the bad. For me, I thought one thing that's a bit wibbly wobbly is the rose garden, where the gray roses are that smell of memories, which I
Mm.
feel like suddenly we're in Neil Gaiman territory here. But um, is that's a garden that was actually created and built by the other or the timeless child back during the time of Rassilon. So the doctor only conjures an image of it in the possibility generator, but it is an actual real garden you can go to. And in fact, retroactively, that's the garden you see the Hartnell doctor wandering around in both the Three Doctors and the Five Doctors before he gets snatched out of time and dumped into a multi-doctor crossover story. So, the other thing I thought was fun was that the possibility generator can fool a ghost. You can. That's like using a holodeck to fool a ghost. I just Beverly Crusher should have got on that. Just
That's really
uh,
funny.
yeah, yeah. My possibility, the Quence's ghost is completely fooled by the possibility generator when the doctor takes him off to a presidential election thing that he just conjured up on the possibility generator, and the ghost completely falls for it. It totally thinks it's real until he tells him, no, no, it's just something I
That's really
conjured up.
fantastic.
Yeah. Did you have any particularly wibbly wobbly thoughts on this?
I didn't have any notes for Wibbly Wobbly this time, so I'm gonna go with your. I'll just agree with your Wibbly Wobblies for
All right.
this
Well,
episode, but I'll have Wibbly Wobblies in future episodes for
I
sure.
will have to do some weirder Doctor Who. Apparently, this was too normal for you. Uh, well, I did want to touch on the time some of the Time Lord lore that is revealed in this. First and foremost, the position of Ordinal General, which first was mentioned in the novel Lunbarrow when they say Quences Ordinal General, but they never explain what it is. You have to wait till this audio comes out to find out that an Ordinal General is basically the equivalent of like a president elect. He's waiting until he dies, and then he gets to be this ghost called Auld Mortality, who haunts the president and keeps them aware that life is fleeting and that they are not infinite, unlimited God things, but are in fact mortal beings who will in fact die, and not to get too big of a head on their shoulders. Um, so yeah, that's when they die. Let's see they haunt the president. That's their job.
No
uh,
wonder no one wants to be president.
well, it's a secret. Nobody knows about it. Except, Susan is about to become president, and she doesn't know what Auld Mortality is. She figures out that, hey, that's the guy who's hiding in the shadows of all the paintings, the inauguration paintings.
Oh, that's true.
But nobody knows about it except, well, presumably once you become president, you know about it because, Auld Mortality won't shut up about the maggots in his pockets and the worms are coming for you. Which, given how big-headed the Time Lords are, I mean, they're literally known as gods of the Fourth sometimes, that it actually makes a certain amount of sense to have somebody whose only job is to make sure that the highest ranking Time Lord on Gallifrey, the highest ranking Time Lord period, doesn't get too big of a head on himself. That doesn't think he's, it also casts some new light on Barusa desperately trying to become immortal in the
Mm.
Five Doctors. Like, was he just absolutely fed up with Auld Mortality? Because they take out Auld Mortality in this story, but that's as a different timeline. So apparently Auld Mortality is potentially still running around causing problems, or at least stressing out the presidents. Um, so, uh, yeah.
It's very interesting that Time Lords have this like kind of weird well, you know, this like mystical aspect, but it is interesting like now the doctor says he doesn't believe in ghosts in the shows. So could Auld Mortality really be a ghost, or do the Time Lords have a kind of, maybe they just say ghost but they really mean it's like some kind of, you know, different plane
Well,
of
yes.
existence or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah,
the every Time Lord and or Gallifreyan, in fact, who dies gets their consciousness scanned and uploaded into the Matrix
into the Matrix,
traditionally.
right?
And they
Yep.
mentioned, Susan mentions that legally all deceased consciences have to be interned in the Matrix memory garden.
Which is so
Um,
wild that they came up with that concept, by the way, because that's where we're headed. That's what the singularity is all about. No, it's true. It's still, except
well,
AT&T will be taking a snapshot of your brain and uploading it to the cloud, so that if you get
well,
into
yeah,
an accident, they can restore you. They can give you a positronic brain instead.
that's the sort of genius you can expect from the best Doctor Who writer who ever lived, Robert Holmes. He came up with all of that back in the 1970s.
It's great. Yeah, it's wild.
So yes, Quences is actually sort of a data ghost, a copy of the personality, but instead of running on the Matrix, he's running on Badger, and apparently
Right.
has some sort of psionic projection. Because I don't know about quite how it works with an Avatroid. Maybe he was modified, but most Gallifreyan technology is based on artronics, which or exotonics as it's sometimes known, which funnels psychic energy. So it doesn't use optical light to transfer the signal. It does not use electricity to transfer the signal. It uses psychic energy to transfer the signal up and down their lines and stuff, which psychic energy can, of course, carry all sorts of information. And so
Yeah.
you can. All of the Gallifreyan technology is psychic.
Yep. Psychic paper, psychic everything.
Sonic screwdriver works by thinking about it
Think about
to a
it.
large
Yep.
degree.
You
Uh,
even look at a screen and for sure it's giving you more information through like psychic means. Like you're not even looking at a
oh
screen
yeah,
actually. You just look. What? Who's the doctor that had that quirk? It was the 11th Doctor. The 11th Doctor would stare at his Sonic.
yeah.
Or no, it was and the 10th
Actually,
Doctor would
several.
listen to it. I feel
Yeah,
like it was
and
like
Jodie Whittaker looks deliberately
she
weeps
looked,
and then
yeah,
holds it
and then
up.
looks at it. Yeah, so
Yeah, I feel like there's a psychic interface that's popping up, and I also tend to assume that all the console controls on the TARDIS console are, especially
augmented reality. Yeah, it's
have
true.
psychic labels on them. So because people can walk into custom designed consoles and instantly know, like the master in Utopia has no trouble running the Doctor's TARDIS.
Right,
Well, he does, but only because of what the Doctor does. In
right.
general, he doesn't. He knows where all the controls are instantly, which, if they were all psychically labeled, would make some sort of sense. But
That
you
it
can't.
wouldn't, which is why the brilliance of the 11th Doctor's TARDIS with the hammer and stuff. It's like none of that It doesn't matter. It just it'll still do what you need it to do. You just have to read the correct psychic labels, which is great.
Well, yeah, I think they're psychically labeled, but you still have to physically manipulate the
Right,
controls. Otherwise, all
but
you would need is a big red button to confirm
right.
with the word "confirm" written on it. I think I want to do this, beep, and I think I want to do this, beep, and I think I want to do this, beep. Yeah, so clearly the
Yeah,
flipping of the controls is actually required in most cases,
but it
or
could
at
be
least,
configured in any way. In other words, like it could be
yeah,
a button, a lever. It could be like a goop of jelly.
yeah,
It could be like a spinny thing. Like those things are what I mean. Like
yeah.
that's genius. I like that.
Yeah,
It
well,
keeps you running around.
the console literally, depending on where you're standing, the controls do different things. If you'll recall from the lodger, the Amy was flipping the switch and it wasn't doing what the Doctor needed. He's like, take a few steps to your right or
That's
something like
right.
that, and then flip it again, and then it did it because she wasn't
That's
standing in the
right.
right place and the
That's
control
right.
was doing something else. Which, of course, if there's psychic labels, as you take a few steps and all the labels change, then that's reasonably easy to use. But especially if your brain works as fast as a Time Lord's or a Gallifreyan's. But anyway, so this is one of the few audios that delves into the great houses of
Yep.
Gallifrey. Um, and I think we had a rather low resolution picture there for the great houses, or at least a great house, the physical chapter house.
All right. 1 second. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. So each Gallifreyan comes from a house. They're a family, and each family is led by a Kithriarch. Though sometimes they have a different traditional title, but it's effectively a Kithriarch. And the And a member of a house can give up the protection of their own house and can even become a patriarch of a new chapter house and loom if they have the right resources. I'm not quite sure how that all works. The economy of Gallifrey is largely symbolic and very unclear. It seems like it's mostly a ceremonial economy. So,
Hmm.
like you pay for something because that's traditional, but it's
It doesn't really mean anything to them.
yeah. It's like the opposite of the Federation, where they got rid of money because they didn't need it. The Gallifreyans kept it because it's the way things have to be, but they don't need it still. They just kind of push the money around. Um, a renegade Time Lord traditionally renounces his name and in his house. Um, and the physical houses are created through cryptoforming and are actually sapient. They are the oldest living things on Gallifrey.
Ah.
Most of them dating back to around the time of Rassilon gaining power, and some of them even older than that. They have physical roots that extend deep into the ground beneath them. They're actually like they're organic. They grow, and a lot of them have structures inside with like trees and stuff as support columns and things. It feels very much like something that's almost like the house was grown like a tree, grown out of tree by modifying a tree a bunch.
Are they bigger on the inside?
Not traditionally, but there's
Hmm.
no particular reason why you couldn't have one that was bigger on the inside. And the inside of the house and the furniture is all built to a massive scale, so that because most looms only loom Gallifreyans as full adults and not as little children, the tradition is that the house will have all the furniture be really big so that you get a chance to feel like what it's like to be a kid at some point in your life. So, like, getting in and out of a chair can be a bit of a climbing roll, climbing
Wait,
skill check.
is that on film yet? Has that ever been on
No,
televised or film?
almost all of this, most of this information comes from Mark Platt's novel
Lily
Lunbarrow.
Tomlin comes to mind, and I feel like that needs to be something that Jodie Whittaker, if she hasn't done at some point, needs to do. Like talk about her childhood and as on Gallifrey in this house and when she
It
was
would be, yeah,
loom.
I would absolutely, if I was showrunner or writing a Doctor Who, would love to stick in a scene where they find some giant furniture inside the TARDIS. And they never explain it because a lot of people don't buy into the whole loom thing and all of that. So I wouldn't want to rain on anyone's parade by being too direct about it.
But how
But,
funny that's my baby furniture.
yeah.
I'd leave it at that. That's
Yes.
oh yeah, that's my baby furniture.
And those
That's
who know would know, but those who don't would just think, wow, the Doctor's a weird person.
was the doctor a huge baby? That's what
Yeah. Was
the
the
internet.
Doctor a giant baby? Yeah.
It's really funny. Anyways,
Um, and each house has a loom shed which holds its loom. And the
mm.
Honorable Central Population Directory defines how many cousins each house can have
Hmm.
at any given time. And each loom has a unique genetic core that standardizes the abilities and blood of every loomling of that family. So you will see, like houses produce Gallifreyans who are really good with the telepathy and psychic stuff, and others produce Gallifreyans who are particularly talented in this or that, and those will tend to be found in the same family. So there's a certain family trait from that genetic core template. Family traits that one family will have. Some houses loom actual little bitty Gallifreyans, children,
Mm.
that then have to grow up, and others loom them as full size adults. So
I see.
and they have drudges, which are giant automated servants that look like they're made out of polished or varnished wood. They look like varnished wood robots. And they're huge, just to make you feel small. And they'll do all the servant stuff, make the food, clean the house, answer the door, all of that. And they're called drudges. And the Doctor's house is one of the founding exo houses that dates all the way back to the dark times before the Time Lords. Most of the houses were created during when Rassilon came to power, but about five or six, still exist from the time before Rassilon came to power. And Lunbarrow is one of those really old houses that are millions or maybe even a billion years old, possibly. And it was reformed in response to the curse of sterility that prevented normal reproduction throughout Gallifrey. The crest of Lunbarrow is two silver-leafed trees whose branches reach over and intertwine. 45 cousins are allotted to the House of Lunbarrow, and when they kicked the Doctor out, they went and loomed a new guy, I think named Ois. But they didn't get their paperwork right, which caused a bunch of bureaucratic problems. They didn't file their paperwork for kicking him out properly. And there's some very fringy evidence from unreliable sources that Omega was also a member of the House of Lunbarrow. So
Interesting.
And most of the people in the House of Lunbarrow end up becoming Prydonians. And some houses tend to spend a lot of time in their physical chapter house. Others generally just leave the housekeeper there and live in the capital or one of the other city complexes, and they just basically come back for loomings and tombings. Let's see. As Quences reveals, the Doctor's house had fallen out of favor over the last several thousand years. And in the Prime timeline, it gets deleted from history because it didn't file the right paperwork when they loomed Ois after they kicked the Doctor out.
That sounds like a Douglas Adams thing.
Well, there was an easy appeal process. Basically, they said, you've got 5 days to fix your paperwork. And then because of Glospin assassinating Quences, in the Prime timeline, the entire house went into this sort of panic state and buried itself underground. And they couldn't get out. And then 5 days later, well, they never filed the paperwork, erased from history. So yes, always fill out your paperwork on Gallifrey, or steal a TARDIS and get the hell away from there, because those are your only two options. Many of the house was physically ended up being physically destroyed about after being buried for 673 years. And most of the surviving cousins who ended up escaping before it was destroyed ended up being recruited by House Paradox. More on them later. So the chapter house for Lunbarrow is located in the southern Gallifrey mountain ranges, perched halfway up Mount Caden on the west side of the mountain. And we've learned that there's a full cellar of draconian wine in there someplace. But so, any questions? Draconian wine. Draconians were from a Third Doctor story, Frontier in Space.
Oh, okay.
So
there was a word you used that I wasn't familiar with that sounded like similar to matriarch or patriarch, but you said something else.
Kithriarch.
Kithriarch. Yeah, I meant to ask you about that.
That is the title of the head of the family. And I think it's generally males, but I think Iris Wildtime's family had a female at the head of her house. In fact, I think the whole house was female. So it varies, but my impression is normally it's male. Gallifrey is a very male-centric society.
Right.
So, like the looms generally produce males more than females by a significant margin. Like I think it's like 1 to 10, or 1 to 9 margin. 9 males and then 1 female.
I accidentally put this up on screen. I didn't mean to, but I might as well explain myself. This is I have an AI generator, and this is what it thinks House Lunbarrow looks like.
I want a copy of that. I like it. It captures the organic growth of the place.
It's
It
wild that it would even know that. Like that's crazy. It
looks
looks
like
like a
it's
TARDIS console too. Like almost like a there is some kind
yeah,
of a console impression. It does probably
yeah,
does different things with the loom mechanism, but
could
yeah,
be.
it's like
It almost looks like it's trying to do an omniscate there too, but above it, the circular thing at the dead center of the picture.
and
Um,
then I actually also got an exterior picture out of the AI, and I'll show that one to you.
oh, right.
And there's the exterior of House Lungbarrow,
Okay.
with
Well,
possibly the mountains of
yeah, it
Gallifrey in the
doesn't quite look
background.
like
Yeah,
it's halfway up a mountain,
yeah.
I like the interior. The exterior could be a Gallifreyan house. There's lots of houses. Every there's
Yeah,
loads.
Gallifreyan house. There we go. It's not Lungbarrow, but it is
Yeah, in
a
the classic
Gallifreyan.
era, there were millions of Gallifreyans, and they all had houses. And apparently, the quotas were something like 50 or 45. So there had to be quite a few houses.
All right. Well, I will send you that. That's cool.
No, I love that. That's beautiful. Better than a lot of the fan art I found, or even some of the official art.
Well, maybe that could become a thing. We could do a little AI generated art sequence on the show if you like.
That would be fun. ah. Well, did you have anything else to say about Auld Mortality?
Well, no, but I guess I am very interested in all the. I know we'll talk about looming and Time Lord, stuff more. So I have no more questions. That was really good explanation on the. I like the tie-in with the houses. That was very cool. Oh, but you did say more on the other house, and I don't
Oh,
know
House
if you
Paradox,
yeah, House
eventually
Paradox,
to be
yeah.
renamed itself Faction Paradox. Yeah, they're a huge thing. There will be at least one show, maybe multiple shows
I
focused on
recognize
them.
Faction Paradox for some reason. I don't know. Is there something? Why would I know that? It's interesting.
They are a house. Paradoxes are basically considered evil by Time Lord Gallifreyan culture.
Right.
They're to be avoided. They're violations of the laws of time.
Even though the
Um,
11th Doctor says that most paradoxes generally resolve themselves, but yeah, maybe he's just
yeah.
being.
Uh, so naming yourself House Paradox is like the ultimate kind of metal goth rebellious thing that you could do with your house on Gallifrey. It's like calling your band the Dead Presidents or something. It's very a fairly offensive name,
That's funny.
and they are a group of people who basically define themselves as whatever pisses the Time Lords off. That's what we are. So, Time Lords hate death because they live forever, so we will worship death. And Time Lords hate paradoxes and changing history, so we're going to make that our thing. So yes, and the leader, the founder, the grandfather is the title of someone who founds a house. The grandfather of House Paradox was from Lunbarrow, so was the voodoo priest of Lunbarrow.
Oh, that explains so much when you were talking about that was a neat thing too. It's something that I had known a long time ago for some reason, but I had forgotten about it. But Susan, of course, being of House Longbarrow, not necessarily. That means that at some point the Doctor was the grandfather of the house, or does it mean that he's also literally her grandfather? Like,
Susan has a very convoluted and complex backstory that
that's true.
I'm not sure I want to get into that tonight, but we are
Okay, got
absolutely
really
we are
gotta get
going to
into
cover
it.
that in detail. We are absolutely going to cover that in detail.
Okay, okay.
But Susan's backstory is going to be its own show because that's a lot.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
uh, so all right. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to take us. I'll finish us off with our TARDIS feature of the week.
Nice.
And could you put up the? There we go. This is known as the time scanner. It uses using the metastasis switch. A TARDIS scanner can be set to serve as a time scanner. This will allow it to view possible futures or the possible future or past of the current TARDIS crew, though usually only a few days. It's designed to be a navigational aid. However, when configured as a time scanner, the system often picks up completely unrelated data from other points in space and time, and the resolution tends to be terribly somewhat poor and more like some sort of AI dreamscape thing that is often somewhat hard to interpret. So for this reason, it's not really considered very reliable. They trotted it out in let's see, the episode right before the Macra Terror. What was that? Tomb of the or
Mm,
the moon base, maybe. Might have been the
I
moon
think so.
base.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, as a way to foreshadow what was going to be happening in the next story, and I think it's cropped up in one or two of the novels, but and one of the audios too. But yeah, it's oh, and most notably probably is in the 1996 TV movie Made in America. At one point, when the Doctor and Grace get back to the TARDIS, the Doctor projects an image of what's going to happen if the TARDIS's eye stays open. And it shows this destructive wave sweeping through the solar system, destroying all of these planets. And I'm pretty sure that was the time scanner that he used to show that possible future that was coming. So there's an example of it that people are probably a little more familiar with. And you also see it again at the beginning of the Macra Terror, which was recently released on animation and where we get this wonderful screen capture from. So that's the
Very
TARDIS
cool.
feature of the week.
I love it. Very nice.
So Hell, I understand you also have other shows you do as sometimes under the nom de plume of Starfleet Boy.
That is correct. Yes. If you, thanks for mentioning that. If you want to go check me out, just search for Google Starfleet Boy and you'll find me. But I'm on Twitter as Starfleet Boy and YouTube primarily. Those are my most active places with Starfleet Boy. So please subscribe.
Right. And you can find if you want more information about Time Lord stuff and are tired of waiting for these episodes to come out, you can check out my reservoir of Time Lord secrets at allthingstimelord.com. I am also just as of today on the Twitter thing at ROO Time Lord, Rassilon Omega, and the other guy Time Lord, ROO, and so yeah, if you're looking for, if you're impatient and want more great knowledge about the Time Lords, there you can find stuff. And now let's take a look at the time scanner and see what we will be doing for next week. All right, hold on, it's coming through. Next week we are going to be covering Full Circle, the fourth Doctor episode from season 18. Where they go to E-Space and pick up Adric.
All right.
Okay, that's just not a story set on Gallifrey. It's not even in the Gallifrey's universe. I don't
doesn't
understand.
make sense.
Yeah, why is the time scanner showing us this story? I guess you guys will have to tune in next week and find out how Full Circle relates to the secrets of the Time Lords.
All right, we'll have to come back. Yes, I'll be back for sure.
Oh, yes.
What's our sign off, Brian? Is there like a?
Oh, I guess they can all. We'll see you all later in these time and relative dimensions in space.
I like it. See you later.